Hey guys, tonight we're heading west. Not the postcard version with wide skies and heroic standoffs, but the real gritty, sweat stained experience of daily life in the American frontier. You're not a cowboy legend. You're just trying to survive another day without breaking your ankle in a prairie dog hole or being conned into buying a miracle tonic made from turnip juice and kerosene. Picture this: a dusty main street, horses tethered to railings, sun scorching your already sunburned neck, and the stench of unwashed humanity wafting from every creaking building. Welcome to the Wild West. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love reading those. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in the Wild West, dusty sore, and already regretting your choices. The town greets you with a palette of browns, brown buildings, brown clothes, and a brown dog that's either asleep or dead in the road you don't check. Your boots squelch slightly as you step off the stagecoach. And that's not mud. It's a mystery you'll learn to ignore if you want to keep your sanity. The air smells like horse sweat, pipe smoke, and something acrid that might be rotting cabbage. That's just the general store. Every surface is coated in a thin film of dust, including your teeth. You spit, it's brown. You blink, it's gritty. Welcome to your new dental routine. Blink often and keep your mouth shut. You try to adjust to the climate, which is somewhere between oven and blacksmith's forge. Shade is rare and usually occupied by someone meaner than you. The sun's merciless, baking the earth till it cracks like an overcooked pie crust. No wonder everyone walks bow-legged and squints like they're constantly mistrusting you. They are. Your lodging. A room above the saloon naturally. You open the door and the bed creaks in protest, more a suggestion of sleep than a promise. There's no mattress, just hay stuffed in a ticking that smells faintly of mildew and panic. And the pillow. If you press it just right, a spring jabs you lovingly in the ear. The walls are so thin you can hear every argument, flirtation, and bar fight happening below. You learn more about the bartender's love life than you ever wanted to. Occasionally, gunshots punctuate the lullabies. You flinch. Everyone else keeps chewing. Bathing. Sure, if you count one shared tin tub in the back alley, filled once a week, whether it needs it or not. You lower yourself in praying no one walks by, or worse joins. Soap's a luxury, warm water a myth. Most locals settle for a brisk dusting off. You step outside and get slapped by the wind, which carries not only tumbleweeds, but also fine desert sand and the odd insect that lodges in your ear. Children play with sticks. Adults play with cards, and both are equally likely to result in tears. You pass the blacksmith, whose entire trade relies on brute force, muscle memory, and zero safety precautions. Sparks fly, and so do expletives. You flinch again. The smith barely notices he's too busy forging horseshoes and existential dread. Historically, frontier towns like this sprang up almost overnight thanks to mining booms or railway expansions. Most were more tents than buildings, Some didn't even last a full year before drying up, sometimes literally. Historians still argue whether these towns shaped the West or if the myth of the West shaped them. You catch a whiff of something new biscuits baking, maybe hope flickers. You follow your nose and discover it's just lye soap being stirred in a kettle. The hope dies swiftly, respectfully. At the center of it all stands the saloon, social hub courtroom, and sometimes morgue. Outside, a hitching post is tangled with confused horses, one of whom seems to be chewing someone's hat. Inside, it's dark, smoky, and smells like sawdust and regrets. You'll be back here later for worse. By the end of the day, your boots have chafed new skin off your heels, your hat's collected an entire biosphere of dust, and your lips are cracked like old leather. You want water, but the pump's dry, and the last time you tried the river, you met a rattlesnake who didn't appreciate your company. You sit on the rickety porch of your new home, watching the sun paint the horizon in fire. It's beautiful, yes, but it's also a reminder. You're one sunstroke away from becoming local folklore. You head back to the saloon, because, let's face it, there's nothing else to do. And the piano's only slightly out of tune tonight. The place greets you with the usual bouquet of warm beer, stale sweat, and tobacco that's been chewed longer than most marriages here last. A drunk man snores on a card table, hand still loosely holding a losing hand. That might be a metaphor, or just this town's default mode. The bartender is a woman with forearms stronger than your moral compass. She slides you a glass of something amber. It smells suspiciously like varnish. This is whiskey, but whether it's made from corn or boot polish is up for scholarly debate. You sip. Your throat catches fire. Your eyebrows attempt to flee your face. You smile politely, because that's safer than insulting the house blend. Gambling here isn't just a pastime, it's a necessity. Cards, dice, even a game of guess what animal this jerky came from. Spoiler, the answer is rarely beef. You join a table where the stakes are modest. A few coins, a toothpick, and someone's boot. You're not sure whose. The dealer has a lazy eye and a quicker draw than your thoughts. You fold preemptively. Guns are holstered on every hip, but most remain untouched. Contrary to Hollywood shootouts are rare. Bullets are expensive, and nobody wants to die over a spilled beer. Still, the air is thick with the possibility. You shift in your seat, trying not to make eye contact with a man arguing with a cactus. He's winning. Outlaws drift through, but they're more sad than scary mismatched spurs, sunken cheeks, and a hat that's clearly seen both better days and worse decisions. You overhear two men betting on whether the moon will rise red. Another wonders aloud if it's an omen. Of what someone asks. Doesn't matter, he shrugs. We just like omens. You get the sense that this place runs on luck rumor and questionable ethics. Lawmen exist somewhere, but tonight, the only authority present is a chalkboard listing house rules like no shooting the piano again and don't ask about the stew. Your neighbor at the bar tells you about the last big fight, two miners arguing over whether a dog could be mayor. They never settled it. The dog disappeared. Some say he took the gold. Others say he was the gold. That last theory came from a man with a possum in his coat. The room spins gently, not from the whiskey, but from the sheer weight of noise and smoke. Somewhere, someone starts singing a ballad about a lost chicken and a woman named Loretta. You don't know the lyrics, but somehow you hum along. A mainstream, historical fact Saloons in the 19th century American West were often multifunctional spaces, bars, courtrooms, and hotels all rolled into one. They were also one of the few places where news spread, songs were born, and deals were made or broken. Some even served as postal drop-offs. You could buy a drink, post a letter, and ruin your marriage all before noon. Quirky tidbit. Some saloons had sawdust carpets, actual layers of sawdust on the floor, to soak up spills and less charmingly spit. It worked better than you'd think, and worse than you'd hope. Back at your table, the gambler next to you whispers a tale about a haunted mine where miners still hear pickaxes tapping at night. You smile nervously, unsure whether he means literal ghosts or metaphorical regret. Either seems plausible. The piano player hits a sour note, looks offended at the instrument, then continues with more confidence than accuracy. The melody shifts, the mood softens. Someone proposes a toast to those who made it this far. Glasses clink. One breaks. No one flinches. You excuse yourself, stepping outside for fresh air that smells like manure and moonlight. It's oddly refreshing. A horse eyes you judgmentally. You nod respectfully. This is normal now. In the distance, a coyote howls. It's less dramatic than you expect, more of a wheeze, really. Still, it reminds you that out here, everything is watching, waiting, or trying to steal your shoes. You return inside to find a new game, starting arm wrestling left-handed. The prize, a bag of nails and half a sweet potato. You're tempted, those are luxury goods. But tonight, you're a spectator. You sip your varnish whiskey, feel the sting, and watch the room fade into a sleepy blur. The noise dims. The arguments quiet. Even the poker table seems to lean back and exhale. You're not quite comfortable. You're not quite safe. But somehow, for a moment, you're almost relaxed. Morning in the Wild West doesn't arrive gently. It slams into you like a freight wagon full of regret. The sun hauls itself over the horizon with all the subtlety of a fist fight, and you're awake before your eyes open because someone below your floor just kicked a table over. Again. You shuffle toward the outhouse, which looks like it was built by someone who had never seen wood nails or right angles. The path there is a minefield of chicken droppings, broken glass, and a suspicious puddle that may or may not hiss. You don't stop to ask. The outhouse itself. It's a leaning wooden box with a door that doesn't latch, and a scent that could peel wallpaper if the walls had any. This is where the frontier dreams come to die. Inside, it's dark, damp, and disturbingly echoey. You sit carefully, avoiding eye contact with the hole. Something shifts beneath the seat. You finish your business at light speed. Sanitation. Out here is best described as philosophical. Most people bathe monthly more often if they lose a bet. Water is scarce, and hygiene scarcer. Chamber pots are dumped into the street. If you're lucky, the wind isn't blowing your way. If you're unlucky, it blows just as you step outside. Guess which one you are. Cholera, dysentery, and typhoid fever are not exotic diseases. They're just neighbors. Entire towns have been brought to their knees by a single contaminated well. Historians still argue whether some settlements declined due to migration or simple microbial revenge. You head toward the pump to wash your hands, or at least rinse them judgmentally. But there's a line. One woman's trying to clean her baby. Two men are filling canteens, and someone else is attempting to bathe a goat. The goat is not pleased. You opt for the rain barrel instead. The water's cloudy, smells vaguely of frogs, and contains actual tadpoles. You mutter an apology and dip your hands quickly. They emerge wetter, not cleaner. A mainstream fact, frontier towns often lacked sewage systems entirely. Waste disposal was rudimentary outhouses, honey wagons, and the occasional dumping ground on the edge of town. Diseases spread rapidly, especially in warmer months. Some towns banned open buckets after outbreaks, but enforcement was optimistic. Quirky tidbit: some folks used newspaper as toilet paper. Not for comfort, just availability. Entire editions of the Fort Worth Gazette may have met their ends in grim silence. You return to your room to discover a dead fly in your boots. You shake it out, pretend it's good luck, and lace up anyway. There's a knock at the door. It's your neighbor asking if you want to join a new venture, delivering mail by mule. It pays in chewing tobacco and regional fame. You decline wisely. You wonder how anyone stays healthy in a place where the water might bite you back. The answer is they don't. Most people carry the look of someone who has fought off 3 diseases and is currently wrestling with a 4th. Everyone has a cough. It's the town's unofficial anthem. The doctor, if you can call him that, sells a concoction labeled elixir. The ingredients are secret, but you catch a whiff of peppermint turpentine and what might be regret. People swear it cured their rheumatism. Others say it just knocked them out long enough to forget it. You pause for breakfast. The options: dry biscuit, fried fatback, or something mushy and gray that the cook insists is porridge. You pick the biscuit. It chips a tooth. You finish chewing anyway out of pride. Outside, someone's hosing down the saloon steps with what looks like leftover beer. You decide not to ask. Nearby, a man sneezes so hard his hat flies off. No one reacts. Germ theory hasn't reached here yet, and frankly, neither has basic decency. Still, you find yourself adjusting. You walk around the puddles. You angle your hat just so to block the worst of the sun. You start to understand the appeal of chewing on a straw. It's not about taste. It's about giving your mouth something to do besides scream. But then, just as you're beginning to settle, you see it, the outhouse door, swinging open again, slowly, ominously, as if daring you to return. You promise yourself 2 things: find cleaner water and never eat that porridge again. One of those promises you'll break. You've decided to brave the general store today, partly because you need supplies, but mostly because your socks smell like they've declared independence. The store is the largest building in town, which isn't saying much. It's mostly shelves, stacked with confusing objects and the lingering scent of pickled despair. Inside, it's dim and cluttered barrels of flour, bolts of cloth, mismatched boots, and something in a jar that may once have been a pickle or a small animal. You nod at the storekeeper, a woman with a permanent squint and a ledger as thick as the Bible. She doesn't speak, just gestures to the shelves, daring you to find what you need. You approach the clothing section, and the tragedy begins. Let's start with undergarments, scratchy, heavy, and engineered for maximum chafing. The socks made of wool thick enough to smother a medium-sized animal. Shirts come in one size rough. And then there are corsets, if you're a woman or a man who's lost a bet. Corsets here aren't the stylish Instagram filtered type. They're rib-crushing, breath-squeezing torture devices designed to create the illusion of delicacy while giving you bruises shaped like the blacksmith's hammer. You try one on. You can't bend, breathe, or blink without assistance. And then come the hat's giant felt monstrosities that trap heat like a coal oven. A breeze hits your neck, and you nearly cry from the sensation. Fashion in the West isn't about comfort. It's about survival, and occasionally, passive-aggressively, asserting your social rank via hat feathers. Let's talk shoes, or rather boots. They're made of stiff leather, have no insoles, and sport heels high enough to break your ankle, but not your fall. Spurs jingle menacingly with every step, and you're constantly one wrong lurch away from skewering your own calf. Historians still argue whether frontier clothing evolved from necessity or simply from mutual suffering. Some say these designs reflected European influence. Others suggest they were punishment for moving west in the first place. A mainstream fact, the average settler owned very few outfits, often rotating 2 sets, one for labor, one for church. Clothes were patched repeatedly and handed down like heirlooms. You wore what you had, and if it itched or overheated you, that was just part of the ambiance. Quirky tidbit. Some frontier women wore rattlesnake rattles as earrings, either as good luck charms or to say, "Don't mess with me," more efficiently than words could. You browse the accessory section. The belts are wide enough to carry a small dog. The scarves are mainly to keep dust out of your teeth, and the gloves, thick leather things, might protect you from barbed wire, but definitely not emotional trauma. You overhear a young boy asking if the store sells shoes without nails poking through the soles. The storekeeper sighs, points to a bin labeled "mostly safe footwear," and goes back to tallying receipts with a crow quill. You pick out a new shirt, dark brown, to hide the dust and/or blood, and a hat that only mostly smells of mildew. It's an upgrade. On your way out, a man wearing a tattered military coat and mismatched boots enters holding up a possum pelt and asking if it can be traded for lard. No one blinks. This is commerce. Outside, the sun mocks your new wool shirt. You begin sweating instantly, and now the hat traps heat like a steam tent. You're basically walking soup. You spot a woman adjusting her corset in the window reflection, grimacing. She notices you looking, shrugs, and mutters, "Style is pain." You nod solemnly and nearly trip on your own spurs. As you return to your room, you begin to appreciate the sheer stubbornness it took to survive out here, not just fighting the elements and diseases, but doing it while dressed like an angry mannequin. You lie on your creaky bed, every article of clothing attempting a different form of betrayal. And somewhere deep in your boots, the fly returns. You wake up in a mood best described as irritable biscuit. Your back hurts, your mouth feels like it's lined with burlap, and your left big toe has a pulse. The boots did that. But what really gets to you this morning isn't the heat, the flies, or the persistent mystery smell wafting from the alley. It's the sharp, constant ache in your molar. It's a toothache, and it means you're about to meet the scariest man in town, the barber. But let's rewind a second. You limp to the saloon, hoping for distraction, maybe even whiskey as medicine, only to hear 2 cowhands debating duels. Back in the day, one says puffing dramatically on a cigar stub, men settled things with lead. His friend snorts. Yeah, and most of them missed. Or dropped the gun. A mainstream historical fact, despite Hollywood fantasies. Classic Western-style shootouts were exceedingly rare. Guns were expensive, difficult to aim, and using them came with the minor inconvenience of dying or getting jailed. Statistically, far more people in the Wild West died from infected teeth than bullet wounds. Dental care was limited to 2 procedures: yank it out and die screaming. If you had a rotten tooth, you'd visit the town barber, who was also the dentist, sometimes the surgeon, and occasionally the local violinist. Not all of these were equally developed skills. You reluctantly head there because chewing is becoming dangerous. The barber's shop is half lit and smells of lye soap, blood, and regret. Instruments are laid out on a table: a saw, forceps, a small bottle of whiskey, and a rag. You don't ask what the rag is for, you already know. The barber greets you with a cheerful, "Open up," like he's offering candy, not agony. You sit in the chair, a contraption designed to cause maximum spinal insult, and he pokes around with something that looks suspiciously like a screwdriver. He nods gravely, then offers you a choice weight for the traveling dentist who might pass through next week, or take care of it now. You ask about pain relief. He taps the whiskey bottle. Swish or swallow. He grins. Quirky tidbit: some frontier folk tried clove oil or even chewing tobacco as makeshift toothache remedies. Others relied on tooth keys, nasty tools that twisted teeth out like corks. They often shattered the molar, embedding fragments in the gum. You'd finish the job with a prayer and a bottle. You go with now because this throbbing is making your vision blurry. The barber pours a splash of whiskey, hands it to you, and instructs you to bite down on the rag. Then he produces the forceps with the flourish of a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat, except the rabbit, in this case, is screaming. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons were respected community figures or just tolerated out of necessity. Some towns had skilled practitioners. Others had well-meaning but poorly trained amateurs. Your guy, somewhere in between. He has a steady hand and a terrifying smile. He tells you to hold still. You try. There's a yank, a crunch, a burst of bright light in your brain, and then nothing. For a moment, the pain vanishes. Then it's replaced with a new sensation: raw, thudding emptiness where your tooth used to be. You're handed a cloth to bite, and your vision swims in pain and poorly distilled whiskey. Outside, the town continues on. No one notices your pale face or blood-stained chin. This is routine. Tooth out. Business as usual. You sit on a barrel and try not to cry. A little girl walks by and offers you a peppermint. You accept, then realize chewing is off the table for the foreseeable future. You later learn that your extraction was one of the clean ones. You're not sure whether to feel relieved or insulted. As night falls, your face swells impressively. You look like you lost a bar fight to a beehive. Talking hurts. Breathing hurts. You lie in bed, jaw throbbing, realizing that death by duel might have been preferable. Still, there's something comforting about surviving the ordeal. You passed a rite of passage. You earned your place here, not through heroism or gunplay, but through dental suffering. That's the West for you. Your jaw still aches when you wake, but the swelling's down slightly, and you can almost hum again. which is good, because today you're joining a group of prospectors heading toward the hills. Why? Because someone shouted the word gold last night in the saloon, and now everyone's temporarily forgotten their chronic exhaustion. The path out of town is rough, rocky, narrow, and flanked by sagebrush cactus and the occasional snake-shaped shadow. Your fellow prospectors are a mixed bag. An ex-priest with a limp. A young man with a pickaxe, too big for him. And a woman named Mabel, who insists her mule is clairvoyant. You arrive at a dig site by noon. It's little more than a dusty trench near a sluggish stream. But the crew sets up like it's the gates of El Dorado. They hand you a rusty pan and gesture at the river. You crouch, swirl water, and strain your eyes for glitter. Mostly, you find rocks, sometimes a beetle. Gold fever isn't just about wealth, it's about hope. The delusion that with one lucky scoop, you'll change your life. This hope keeps people sweltering under a brutal sun, inhaling quartz dust, and ignoring the fact that they haven't seen a proper toilet in 3 days. Historically, most gold rush hopefuls found little or nothing. Mining was hard labor with minimal return, and the people who made real money were often those selling tools maps or miracle claim markers. Historians still argue whether the gold rush expanded the economy or just redistributed misery. A mainstream fact during the California Gold Rush of 1849, roughly 300,000 people swarmed the region, turning boom towns into overcrowded, disease-ridden camps. San Francisco's population exploded, and so did its prices. A single egg could cost a week's wages. Back at your stream, you dig deeper. The shovel hits something solid. You lean in heart-pounding only to uncover a rusted sardine tin. Mabel's mule snorts knowingly. You hate that you believe it's laughing. The sun beats down. You're sweating in places you didn't know existed. Your shirt clings like wet parchment, and your socks, why are they always damp? You pause to drink water, only to realize your canteen's dry. Someone offers you river tea. It's just warm creek water with a pine needle floating in it. You sip reluctantly. Lunch is jerky, a hunk of cheese and stale bread that fights back. Mabel pulls out a tin of beans. You look at it like it's treasure. She doesn't share. You try another pan of riverbed sludge. This time, there's a flicker, something yellow. You hold your breath, squint, and shout. Everyone gathers. Turns out, it's Micah Fool's gold. A prospector laughs so hard he dislocates something. Quirky tidbit. Some desperate miners used to chew gold flakes to test authenticity. They thought real gold was softer. Unfortunately, a mouthful of dirt and pyrite taught them otherwise. You keep your findings strictly external. The day drags. Your hands blister your back spasms, and a mosquito bites your eyebrow. Someone steps on a snake and panics. The snake panics too. Everyone runs in separate directions. As sunset nears, the group begins packing up. No one found much. One guy insists he found the start of a vein, but no one believes him. He's said that every day this week. You begin the trudge back to town, now coated in dust, sore in 8 new places, and convinced that gold is a lie perpetuated by mule-owning clairvoyants. Your boots are heavier, your soul slightly lighter. You didn't find treasure, but you did survive sunstroke and 3 hours of Mabel's conspiracy theories. Back in town, you flop onto your hay-stuffed bed and exhale. You realize, for all the pickaxes and fevered dreams, your favorite part of the day was the breeze on your face after that first bucket drop. It smelled faintly of pine dust and a kind of freedom. Even if you're poor and exhausted for a second, you almost feel rich. You've recovered from the prospecting misadventure just in time to fall into your next frontier trap medicine, or more accurately, medicine. You've developed a persistent cough, likely from inhaling approximately 3 pounds of mining dust and one small insect. Everyone has advice, and none of it is comforting. Your first visit is to the town apothecary, which is a generous term for a one-room shack with shelves of mysterious jars and a stuffed owl that stares into your soul. The apothecary himself wears spectacles made from 2 mismatched magnifying lenses and smells like licorice and vinegar. You describe your symptoms. He nods solemnly, then offers you a vial labeled Elixir Number 3, Guaranteed Comfort or Slight Hallucinations. You ask what's in it. He waves vaguely. Bark, spirits, possibly radish. You hesitate. He offers a sample. It tastes like the inside of a boot. You buy it anyway, because hope is cheaper than a funeral. A mainstream historical fact. 18th century frontier medicine was a blend of folk remedies, patent medicines, and wild guesswork. The Pure Food and Drug Act wouldn't exist until 1906, which means anyone with a label and a mustache could sell a cure for anything. Quirky tidbit. Some tonics were made with cocaine, heroin, or mercury. One popular product misses. Winslow's soothing syrup, marketed for teething babies, was nearly pure morphine. Children slept like angels. Forever, in some cases. Your second opinion comes from a traveling doctor who sets up shop in front of the general store with a collapsible table and an alarming number of glass bottles. He's wearing a bowler hat, fingerless gloves, and a grin that says, "Trust me, I once dissected a frog." He listens to your chest nod sagely and offers you something called snake lung syrup. It costs 2 bits. You buy it. It tastes like syrup and despair. That night, the symptoms persist, but now you also feel vaguely euphoric and convinced the moon is judging you. You lie awake counting ceiling cracks and considering whether your lungs are trying to leave your body. The next morning, you ask a neighbor what she does for coughs. She hands you a bundle of herbs and a recipe boil with goat's milk. Add a nail and chant softly. You try it. It tastes metallic and vaguely offensive. You do not chant. On the street, a man with a small cart is advertising Dr. Bingham's invigorating elixir for men and most women. His sign promises improved vitality, clearer vision, and the ability to leap small fences. He demonstrates this last claim by tripping over a barrel. You buy the elixir anyway. The label boasts quinine sassafras and a hint of danger. You take a sip. Your ears ring. Is that pleasant? You reflect on the reality that snakes are also part of this equation. Actual snakes. Rattlesnakes in particular seem determined to sabotage your health. You've seen 3 in as many days curled under your porch in your boot again, and once sunning itself on a windowsill like it paid rent. You've developed the habit of knocking on everything before approaching it. Someone laughs at this. that someone has never had a snake look them in the eye while lounging in their hat. Historians still argue whether frontier folk trusted formal medicine or leaned more toward folk traditions. For many, doctors were too expensive, too rare, or too unconvincing. Instead, people turned to home remedies, cultural wisdom, and whatever the apothecary brewed after lunch. You try one final cure, a steam tent made of blankets, boiling water, and a sprig of pine. You sit beneath it, sweating profusely, convinced this is how you die, slowly simmering in a cotton soup. You emerge an hour later, woozy but strangely proud. The cough eases, or maybe you've just grown used to it. You've ingested enough cures to legally qualify as a distillery, but you're still alive, and that counts for something. As you shuffle into the saloon for a medicinal whiskey, you hear someone remark, "Looks like you shook it off." You nod, swallow fire, and agree. You did. You also hallucinated a conversation with the owl in the apothecary. But that's between you and the owl. By now, you've come to understand that comfort is not a frontier priority. Still, you keep pushing forward, this time joining a cattle drive to earn your keep and maybe learn how to not fall off a horse every third mile. Spoiler, you will fall off a horse every third mile. The trail boss is a man named Buck. Just Buck. He has 3 teeth, 6 scars, and 1 rule. Don't touch my hat. No one asks follow-up questions. The herd is massive, hundreds of longhorns with sharp horns and worse tempers. You're given a bedroll, a rope, and a horse named Misery. He lives up to the name. Sleeping arrangements, the wide open prairie. Your bedroll feels like it's stuffed with gravel, and the stars, though beautiful, don't keep you warm when the desert night hits like a bucket of ice water. You curl up, boots on, hat over your face, and pray the coyotes aren't bold tonight. Speaking of coyotes, everything out here buzzes, bites, or burrows into your gear. Ants march across your blanket like they own the land. Scorpions show up uninvited. You find one in your boot, another under your saddle, and a third just casually sitting on your biscuit. You thank it and skip breakfast, your duties. Drive the herd. Keep them moving, and occasionally chase down strays. Sounds simple until your horse decides that every tumbleweed is a ghost. Misery bucks you flail, and gravity wins. Again. You ride for hours, hips sore thighs, burning mouth dry. Water is rationed carefully, and the dust kicked up by cattle coats your tongue like flour. Every time you blink, your eyelashes crunch. You learn to drink without stopping. Just tilt your head and pray the canteen doesn't leak. A mainstream fact: cattle drives in the late 1800s were grueling journeys that could last months. Cowboys worked 15-hour days, slept in their clothes, and earned little pay. The work was dangerous, lonely, and contrary to myth often done by men of color, immigrants, and teenagers trying to escape home. Quirky tidbit cowboy coffee was made by boiling coarse grounds directly in the pot, then letting them settle or chewing them like grit. One cowboy joke claimed the coffee was strong enough to float a horseshoe. You try it. The horseshoe sinks. Your soul goes with it. Meal times are brief and chaotic. The cook called Cookie naturally serves beans, and more beans. Once a slab of bacon appears, it's greeted like a celebrity, then devoured in silence. The biscuits are hard enough to chisel stone, but you eat them anyway because chewing is easier than starving. Night watch is your turn to stay up and keep the herd calm. You circle the cattle, slowly humming or talking softly. It's oddly peaceful until something spooks them. A rabbit. A breeze, your own cough. Suddenly, it's chaos. A stampede. You run, yell, wave your arms, and very nearly get flattened by a 1,000-pound steer named Clementine. The stampede stops, the herd settles, and you collapse face first into your bedroll. When dawn comes, Cookie hands you coffee. Misery kicks your boot, and Buck grunts in approval. You didn't die, he says. That's high praise out here, and you kind of get it now. The open sky, the raw silence, the rhythm of hooves. It's miserable, beautiful, and absolutely not sustainable. But for a moment, you're a cowboy, and your socks still haven't dried. After your cattle driving escapade, you've developed a newfound respect for horses and a deep, enduring distrust. Today's lesson: your steed is not your friend. He is a stubborn, muscle-packed escape artist with an ego the size of Texas and the attention span of a hungry goat. Meet your horse, Still Misery. He's slightly more tolerant of you now, by which I mean he lets you mount without trying to launch you into the sun. But you're not riding off into sunsets just yet. Every attempt at a gallop ends with you clutching the saddle horn and whispering promises to higher powers. You try to lead him to water. He stops to chew a fence post. You try to saddle him. He shifts his weight onto your foot. You whisper sweet nothings. He responds with a tactical sneeze that leaves you dripping in horse-scented mist. This is not a relationship. It's a duel. A mainstream fact: horses were indispensable to frontier life, used for transport, farming, mail delivery, and cattle work. But training them wasn't easy. Most horses had to be broken through a harsh physical process that often left both rider and animal bruised and confused. You sign up to help with mail delivery. It seems simple: ride from one town to another, drop a few letters, maybe avoid bandits. But Misery decides today's ride is a performance piece titled How to Terrify Your Rider in 5 acts. First, he refuses to move. Then he bolts. Then he tries to scrape you off using a low-hanging branch. You survive, but your hat does not. Mail delivery in the Wild West was a noble endeavor, if noble means hauling paper through lawless terrain while dodging storms, wolves, and suspicious strangers. You stop at an outpost and find a single man manning a desk, asleep atop a ledger. He stirs, mutters something about postage rates, and stamps your forehead instead of the letter. You take it in stride. On your ride back, you attempt conversation with Misery. It's mostly one-sided. Please, you beg, just avoid that ravine. He veers toward it. No, you plead. He flicks his tail and trots away casually, disrespecting every boundary you thought you'd established. Quirky tidbit: some cowboys claimed horses could sense a person's mood. If you were nervous, they'd test you. If you were confident, they'd still test you, just with more flair. One rider famously said, "My horse respects me enough to consider throwing me only twice a day." You arrive back in town, dust-caked and half-fused to the saddle. Misery stops on a dime, launching you forward just enough to remind you who's in charge. You dismount. With the grace of a falling log whisper, thanks to the earth beneath you, and limp toward the saloon. Someone asks how the ride went. You stare into the middle distance and say, "We reached an understanding." They nod. They've seen that look before. Later, you spot Misery in the stable dozing peacefully like he didn't spend the day impersonating a catapult. You consider forgiveness. Then he wakes, snorts loudly, and kicks over his feed bucket. You take that as a no. Still, you saddle up again the next day. Because somehow, somewhere between the bruises and the bizarre roadside encounters riding into nowhere starts to feel like a kind of freedom. Just don't tell Misery. It'll go to his head. You're halfway through your second cup of gritty saloon coffee, flavored mostly with desperation when you hear it, a shout from the street, then the distinct sound of someone getting thrown through a window. Again, you don't even flinch anymore. This is just the legal system at work. Out here, the law is like rain, theoretically good, but rarely shows up when you need it. Every frontier town had a sheriff, at least in theory. Sometimes elected, sometimes self-appointed, and occasionally absent. Altogether. In your case, the sheriff is an elderly man named Hank, who's mostly known for his ability to nap standing up. His badge is real. His presence, optional. Vigilante justice fills the gaps. Cattle thieves get tied to posts. Cheats at poker are chased out of town by broom-wielding grandmothers. And if a bar fight gets too messy, everyone just blames Whiskey Phil and moves on. You ask a local about town rules. He laughs for a full minute, then shrugs. Don't shoot the piano player. Don't spit in the stew. And don't marry Cousin Rosie unless you checked her family tree first. He's not joking. A mainstream fact law enforcement in the Old West was often inconsistent, underfunded, and overwhelmed. Marshals covered huge territories with minimal backup. Some towns hired peace officers with no qualifications beyond a loud voice and a willingness to be shot at. Quirky tidbit. Some frontier towns experimented with sundown laws regulations that required strangers to leave by nightfall, not for safety, just to keep the riffraff from stealing the good boots. You witness a dispute over a stolen chicken. One man swears it's his, based on the glint in its eye. The other claims the chicken called him Pa. The sheriff briefly wakes up, mumbles something about honest poultry, and goes back to leaning on his broom. The matter is settled when the chicken escapes. No one pursues it. It's earned its freedom. You try not to get involved in local drama, but you quickly learn that minding your own business is a full-time job. Someone always needs a witness, a lookout, or someone to confirm that the pig was in fact an emotional support animal. Your neighbor tells you about the infamous trial of the tumbleweed thief, where a man was nearly hanged for rolling a dead bush through town. The jury included 2 horses and a crow. The defense rested on the claim that the wind made him do it. He was acquitted. The wind was fined. Justice here is fast, loose, and occasionally poetic. Disputes are settled with duels, arm wrestling, or pie baking contests judged by the least sober man available. You begin to understand why frontier folks carried weapons, but also why they didn't always use them. Conflict is exhausting, and bullets are expensive. Still, there's a strange sense of order in the chaos. Everyone knows the unspoken rules. Don't steal unless you're clever. Don't lie unless it's funny. And never ever borrow a man's hat without asking. That night, you find yourself watching a heated debate over property lines drawn with a stick in the dirt. One man brings a goat as evidence. The goat eats the stick. No one knows what that means, but they all nod solemnly. You go to bed, wondering if justice was served, but mostly, you just hope the chicken found peace. It's been a few weeks now, and your stomach has developed the resilience of an iron skillet, which is fortunate because tonight you're eating stew again. Or maybe it's stew. Definitions are loose out here. The cook is a wiry man named Grady, with one eye, no patience, and a passion for boiling things that should not be boiled. You approach the campfire cautiously. What's for dinner, you ask? He stirs the pot with a ladle shaped like a shovel. Don't ask, he replies. It's better that way. You glance inside. Something gray bobs to the surface, then disappears again like it's shy or sentient. You consider skipping dinner, but your stomach has other plans. You take a bowl blow on it nervously and take a bite. The texture is uncertain. The flavor is mostly salt smoke and something that reminds you of regret. You chew slowly, trying not to make eye contact with whatever's floating near the surface. It stares back. You swallow anyway. A mainstream fact food on the frontier was driven by necessity, not taste. Meals typically consisted of preserved goods, salt pork, beans, coffee, and hardtack. Vegetables were rare. Fresh meat was a luxury. Nutrition was a coin flip. Breakfast beans and bacon. Lunch, cold beans. Dinner, lukewarm beans possibly with a garnish of mystery meat rabbit, if lucky boot leather if not. You once saw a man make a sandwich out of lard and a single green onion. He wept while eating it. You understood. Quirky tidbit son of a gun stew was a real cowboy dish made from calf organs, including the stomach, heart, and yes, testicles. It was considered a delicacy. You'd rather not confirm this with Grady. One day, you try to help in the kitchen. Grady hands you a sack of flour and a skillet, then disappears. You attempt biscuits. They come out dense enough to be classified as blunt weapons. The camp dog gnaws on one and gives up. You call that a win. Later, you experiment with jerky. The result is crunchy, spicy, and unexpectedly smoky. Grady tastes it, nods once, and says, "Could use more kick." He hands you a jar of something unlabeled. You add a pinch. Your mouth catches fire. Grady laughs. Good right. Water is a whole separate issue. If it's not fetched from a well, it's boiled river water, filtered through a sock if you're lucky. Otherwise, you just hope your stomach doesn't revolt. You learn to take tiny sips and make peace with mild hallucinations. You begin to hoard small luxuries. A packet of sugar, a stub of cinnamon. A peppermint stick wrapped in wax paper becomes your most valuable possession. You ration it like gold, licking it once a day and hiding it in your boot, not the one with the hole. Despite the odds, you develop favorites. Cookies corn mush, not bad. Slim's vinegar pickles, surprisingly crisp. Mabel's dandelion tea, soothing if you don't mind twigs. You learn that flavor is relative and sometimes emotional. One evening, someone arrives in camp with a pie, an actual pie, peach flaky crust golden on top. No one speaks. You gather around it, reverently passing it like a sacred artifact. You each get a single bite. It is without exaggeration the greatest moment of your life. You go to bed that night with a warm belly and sticky fingers. The wind howls outside, coyotes sing their lonesome tune, but you sleep deeply, dreaming of spices and sugar. Out here, surviving the day is victory enough. And when the food doesn't kill you, that's just gravy. You're in the barber's chair again. Not for a tooth this time, thankfully, but for a shave and perhaps a reckless attempt at grooming. The barber twirls a straight razor like it's part of a vaudeville act, then gestures to the chair with a flourish that suggests he's been waiting all day to nick someone's ear. The room is unchanged. Same cracked mirror, same overpowering scent of bay rum and floor polish. The chair creaks ominously beneath you. You try not to look at the collection of tools on the shelf. Half of them look more suited to interrogations than haircuts. He drapes a threadbare towel around your shoulders and lathers your face with something cool, foamy, and vaguely lemon-scented. Then he leans in close and whispers, "Hold still." You do. As the blade glides across your jaw, you reflect on the grim reality that in many towns, this was the only health care available. If your leg broke, the barber set it. If your appendix flared up, the barber did exploratory surgery. If you had a bad haircut, the town pretended not to notice. A mainstream fact. Barbers in the 19th century often served as surgeons and dentists, particularly in frontier areas. The red and white barber pole. That's a leftover symbol of blood and bandages, not peppermint sticks. Comforting, isn't it? Quirky tidbit. Some barbers used whiskey, not just for sterilization, but also as cologne mouthwash. And if the customer was unlucky, a distraction during minor surgery. The shave ends with a slap of aftershave that nearly sends you out the window. Clean, the barber declares, wiping the blade on his apron. You nod numbly, more out of reflex than gratitude. Next comes the haircut. You request just a trim. He nods and starts cutting like he's preparing you for enlistment. Hair flies, so do your expectations. Across the street, you spot a man getting his boots shined. He's wearing a vest, a bowler hat, and the kind of confidence that only comes from owning more than one shirt. You suddenly realize you're not just getting groomed, you're being civilized. One razor stroke at a time. In the mirror, you see yourself face-shaved hair, mostly even ears intact. You look not respectable exactly, but slightly less feral, like someone who could borrow a book and not eat the pages. Outside, a woman passes and does a double take. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't scowl either. That's progress. You tip the barber a coin and step into the sunlight, where dust immediately reclaims your suit like a possessive cat. Still, you feel lighter, sharper, mildly presentable. Then your hat blows off. You chase it down the street, dodging wagons, chickens, and an aggressive goose. You retrieve it, dust it off, and jam it back on. Civilization, it seems, is temporary. Still, you hold your head a little higher as you stroll back to the saloon. You order a drink, nod to the barkeep, and ignore the man snoring in the corner. You've survived another rite of passage. You're cleaned, clipped, and slightly dazed. And somewhere, the barber sharpens his blade again. You've now spent enough time on the frontier to know that cowboys are not the denim-clad demigods you once imagined. They're not all tall, not all tough, and certainly not all clean. In fact, most are teenagers, and most of them would rather be anywhere else. Today, you're riding with a small cattle crew, 4 boys, one grizzled older hand named Clem, and a dog named Turkey, who may or may not be smarter than everyone else combined. The boys are wiry, sunburnt, and perpetually chewing on something. Tobacco grass, jerky, you don't ask. You try to make conversation, so why'd you sign up? One shrugs, didn't want to dig ditches. Another says, they feed us. The third, a boy who looks about 12, says, Ma said I was getting too mouthy. You nod like that makes perfect sense. Clem tells you, in his gravelly drawl, that most cowboys are hired hands, day laborers, working long drives for low pay and lower respect. No ranch ownership, no fame. Just endless, dust-sore legs, and nights spent under stars, trying not to snore too loud near the boss's horse. A mainstream fact, the majority of real cowboys were young men in their teens or early 20s. They were transient, underpaid, and performed some of the hardest labor on the frontier. The image of the noble lone rider was largely a product of dime novels and later Hollywood. One of the boys pulls out a harmonica. He plays a few notes badly, then grins like he just performed at Carnegie Hall. Another throws a rock at him. The harmonica continues, somehow worse than before. They tease each other constantly, stealing hats, swapping saddles, tossing pebbles into sleeping rolls. It's childish, chaotic, and weirdly heartwarming. These aren't hardened warriors. They're kids with calluses and nowhere else to go. You help them set up camp. They bicker over firewood. One insists that beans taste better burned. Another claims he saw a bear in the bushes. Clem growls, if you saw a bear, we'd be one hand short right now. Everyone laughs, except the kid, who might be telling the truth. Quirky tidbit. Cowboys often rode with personal mugs or pans tied to their saddles. These were rarely cleaned and often flavored everything with essence of last week. Some cowboys had lucky spurs named horses or weird superstitions like never whistling at dusk. As the fire crackles and the beans bubble, one of the boys starts singing. The others join in off-key but enthusiastic. It's a song about lost boots, broken hearts, and a mule named Elvira. You don't know the words, but you hum along anyway. That night, you sleep next to your saddle, listening to the soft breathing of boys too young for war and too old for innocence. They mutter in their sleep. One kicks off his blanket. Another whispers something about biscuits. You wake before dawn to the sound of Clem pouring coffee and Turkey, the dog, licking your face. The boys groan, stretch, and complain about everything. My back's broke. My boots shrank. Who took my hat? It's chaos again. But somehow you're smiling. Because for all their flaws, these are the real cowboys, young, gritty, loud, and loyal. They'll grow up fast or not at all. Some will stay. Most will drift. But for now, they're part of the trail. And so are you. At first light, the sky looks like it might be kind. It is not. By mid-morning, clouds are boiling on the horizon, tall, dark, and moving fast. Clem glances up and mutters, "We're gonna get all 4 seasons in the next hour." He's not wrong. The storm rolls in like an argument no one asked for. First comes the wind, sharp, sudden, and relentless. Dust kicks up in whirlwinds, stinging your eyes, filling your nose, and settling in every wrinkle of your shirt. You spit, and it crunches. That's how dry your mouth is. Next comes the cold. The temperature drops so fast, it feels like the sun's been yanked from the sky. Your shirt, still damp from sweat, turns into a clammy prison. The wind howls. The horses spook. Someone loses a hat. It's never seen again. A mainstream fact: weather on the frontier was more than just inconvenient. It was dangerous. Settlers and cowboys routinely battled sudden snowstorms, flash floods, and dust storms that could bury fences and blind travelers. There were no forecasts, no warnings, just instinct and the shape of the sky. Then come the rains. Not gentle patter, not cleansing drizzle. A sideways pelting deluge that feels personal. Your boots fill with water. The trail becomes a river of mud. Cattle scatter. You try to yell directions, but the wind steals your voice and throws it somewhere near Kansas. You cling to your saddle and ride low. Lightning cracks followed instantly by thunder that feels like it struck your spine. Misery. The horse flinches, but keeps running. He's learned to fear the weather only slightly more than you're riding. At one point, hail starts to fall. Actual chunks of ice bouncing off hats, shoulders, and skulls. One boy yells, "Ow!" Another yells. Why, a third just screams. You can't blame him. Clem leads the group under a rocky overhang. It's crowded but dryish. Everyone's soaked, shivering, and looking like a pile of angry laundry. Turkey the dog shakes himself and sprays mud on everyone. No one cares. Quirky tidbit. Some cowhands used waxed canvas coats or oilskins to block the rain, but most just got wet. A common phrase. If it ain't raining, we ain't working. You're beginning to understand why cowboy songs always sound like slow, sad dirges. It's not the heartbreak, it's the weather. The storm passes as quickly as it came. The clouds peel back, revealing a searing sun that now wants to steam you like a dumpling. Your clothes dry awkwardly. The trail smells like wet livestock and damp leather. It's both disgusting and oddly comforting. You remount sore and gritty. The herd is scattered, but the boys rounded up with practiced whoops and whistles. No one says much. There's nothing to say. You survived, and that's the only metric that matters. By evening, the air is still the sky soft. The prairie glows orange with the kind of light that makes you believe in postcards. Someone strums a few chords on a banjo. A hawk circles lazily overhead. It's almost peaceful, like the land is sorry for earlier. You sit on a rock, steaming, gently sipping muddy coffee. Someone laughs at nothing. Someone else is snoring already. Clem picks his teeth with a matchstick and says, "Next time it hails, try wearing a stew pot." You nod, like that's a completely normal thing to say. And as the stars rise, you realize the weather out here isn't just scenery. It's a character, loud, rude, and prone to mood swings. But it makes you feel alive. Cold, wet, wind-burned, but alive. You limp into town, just as the sun begins to sag behind the hills, painting the sky in streaks of copper and lavender. The streets are quieter than usual. Just a few silhouettes leaning against posts, squinting into the horizon, waiting for nothing in particular. Your shirt is stiff with dried sweat. Your boots feel like you've walked 100 miles in them because you have. Your hat hangs low, dust-caked and slightly crooked, like everything else in your life right now. You pass the saloon and think about going in, but you keep walking. You're not in the mood for whiskey poker or another debate about whether coyotes can count. Tonight, you want something simpler. A place to sit, a chance to breathe. You settle on the porch of the boarding house, easing onto the creaking bench with the grace of someone who's recently lost an argument with a horse. You exhale, and the sound surprises you. It's the sound of a full stop. The town exhales with you. The air smells faintly of sagebrush and horses. Somewhere down the street, a harmonica drifts through the silence slow, off-key, and oddly comforting. A dog barks once, then gives up. Crickets start their nightly orchestra. You watch the sky dim, first to plum, then indigo, then a velvet black scattered with stars so sharp they almost sting. Out here, there's no haze, no glow from distant cities, just raw, endless night, and 1,000 reminders that you are very, very small. A lantern flickers on in the window behind you. You see your reflection in the glass, unshaven, sunburned eyes rimmed with dust and sleep. You look like a man who's wrestled the frontier and lost, but you're still here. And that counts for something, a mainstream fact. Many who set out for the West never made it. Illness, accidents, harsh weather, and plain bad luck ended more journeys than any gunfight ever did. But those who stayed, who built lives from canvas tents and hope, left marks still visible today. Quirky tidbit. Some towns held survivor suppers, casual get-togethers, where anyone still alive and upright could share food and stories, no matter how ridiculous. One town, reportedly, crowned a least dead resident each month. The prize was usually a pie. You smile at the memory of Clem's advice, the boys off-key singing the way misery almost lets you brush his mane without biting. You remember the taste of that one peach pie, the lightning that lit up the sky, like God was taking photographs. You didn't come out here to become a legend. You came because something inside you wanted to know what it was like to fight the world and find your place in it. Boots worn thin, lungs full of dust, heart humming quietly. Tonight, you sit in silence, the weight of the West pressing gently against your shoulders, not heavy like before, but familiar. You feel it in your bones, your calluses, your cracked lips. You made it, not easily, not gracefully, but you did. And somewhere behind you, the frontier rolls on wide wild and waiting for the next fool to try his luck. Fade to black. The year is 1883, and the Arizona sun has already begun its cruel morning assault. You step out of your single-room adobe shack, squinting into a sky so cloudless it feels personal. Your shirt, once white, now permanently stained with dust and sweat, sticks to your back before you've even made it to the stoop. You have two things on your mind: water and not dying while fetching it. Your town, if you can call 12 buildings and a saloon a town, is technically named Cactus Junction, though the sign fell over 3 years ago and no one's bothered to fix it. The local newspaper, which publishes When It's Not Too Hot to Think Last, ran a piece titled "Horse Dies of Boredom." That was the highlight of the week. The heat feels like punishment, but it's the norm. In this part of Arizona territory, temperatures soar past 100 degrees before the midday bell. You're already rationing your breath because exhaling too much means losing precious moisture. There's no plumbing. Of course, pipes are something rich people in Chicago brag about. Here, if you want water, you walk to it. You glance at the rusty tin bucket hanging from a bent nail on your porch. It mocks you with its emptiness. Inside your canteen holds exactly one warm sip, a cruel preview of the battle ahead. Because today, like every other day, you must make the 4-mile trek to the spring at Dry Gulch Canyon. That is if the coyotes haven't claimed it, or the bandits, or the territorial cattleman who insists he owns every drop under God's sky. You take a deep breath, then cough. Dust. Always the dust. Time to fetch water. Time to risk everything for something your descendants will one day flush away without thinking. You head toward the edge of town where a row of crooked sheds leans against the wind as if too exhausted to stand on their own. That's where you'll find it, the communal water barrel, or what's left of it. Officially, it's maintained by Old Man Peabody, who was once a dentist, then a blacksmith, and now claims to be a hydraulic facilitator. Unofficially, it's filled whenever someone remembers or when a desperate soul like you does the hauling. This morning, the lid's been knocked askew and flies circle like they're attending a wake. A single bucket dangles from a rope. This is that one shady bucket, the only official ladle permitted by town decree. Nobody knows who made the rule, but it's been enforced with more consistency than the law against horse thievery. There was a fist fight last spring when someone brought their own scoop. Bucket justice, they called it. The bucket is stained, dented, and faintly smells of pickles. Legend says it once served as the town spittoon during a poker game gone long. But it's the only bucket allowed, and that's the end of it. You lower it into the barrel with a creaky groan, pull up a slosh of tepid, murky water, and quickly pour it into your canteen. One gulp, maybe two. It's better than nothing. Maybe. The water tastes like sun-warmed tin and regret. As you lean on the edge of the barrel, you hear someone cough behind you. Mrs. Caldwell, wrapped in too many layers for the seasoned eyes, you like a hawk watches a prairie dog. Only take what you can carry, dear, she says sweetly. We all gotta share. You nod because saying anything else would start a conversation, and you don't have the moisture to spare. Time to go. The spring is calling, or maybe laughing. Next stop, the open desert. The trail out of town isn't a trail so much as a suggestion. A few boot prints in the sand, a bent fence post, a buzzard that seems to be following you already. You shift the bucket to your other hand. It's empty, but it already feels heavy with what it's about to cost you. The desert opens up like a frying pan left on a fire too long. Heat waves dance above the cracked earth, and even the shadows are half-hearted. Every few paces, you pass a cactus-tall sentinels of sarcasm, with their arms raised like they gave up a long time ago. One of them has a bullet hole in it. You don't ask why. A mile in, you come across the first cow skull. It's been picked clean, bleached like an old bone sermon. Next to it, a coil of barbed wire curls like a sleeping snake. You step around both. You're learning. That's when you hear the yip. Coyotes. A pair of them, maybe more, just beyond a dry arroyo to your left. They don't come close yet, but they don't scatter either. They just watch. You quicken your pace, reminding yourself that you're not technically edible. Probably. Halfway to the spring, you stop beneath the rare mercy of a mesquite tree. It leans sideways like it wants to fall over, but forgot how. You rest for a moment, knowing full well that stillness invites daydreams, and daydreams invite dehydration. You check the canteen. A quarter sip left. It's fine. You're almost there. You think. Probably. Then a tumbleweed rolls past as if to say, "You sure about this? You get up, because if you don't, the desert will gladly claim another slow walker. And you're not ready to be bones just yet." You march on. You don't hear the rattle at first. It blends into the background hum of cicadas and the low, steady complaint of your boots against hot gravel. But then, just past a dead yucca, you freeze. That sound. Dry beans shaken in an angry fist. The unmistakable percussion of nature's "do not disturb" sign. You squint down. There it is, coiled just a few feet off the path, a western diamondback rattlesnake, thick as your wrist and as grumpy as you are dehydrated. Its tongue flickers. Its eyes don't blink. They never do. But you're sure it's sizing you up. You weigh your options. Option 1. Go around. That means a detour through some nasty-looking brush that almost certainly contains its own share of bitey inhabitants. Option 2. Try to scare it off. With what? A firm tone, a rock. Last time someone tried that, he came back with a limp and a new respect for antivenom, not that anyone here can afford it. Option 3. Wait it out. Hope it gets bored before you pass out from heat. You reach into your pocket and find a small tin of beans from breakfast, cold metallic and sadly empty. You pop the lid off and chuck it a few feet past the snake. It startles. The rattle flares louder, then fades as the snake slithers cautiously toward the noise. You take your chance tiptoeing. With all the grace of a sunburned scarecrow, you make it past barely. The snake doesn't strike, but it leaves behind a signature in your nerves. Your heart thuds so loudly, you're certain even the coyotes heard it. You keep walking. You don't look back. But you do add angry snake diplomacy to your growing list of frontier skills. When you finally reach the canyon's edge, you don't see water. You see people. 3 of them crouch near a trickling stream that dares to call itself a water source. Each wears the same hardened expression, part suspicion, part sunburn. You approach slowly, bucket in hand, like a white flag. The biggest man leather vest. One boot missing nods at you, but doesn't smile. This here's Johnson Creek. He grunts, named after my grandpappy, who shot a man for spitting in it. You nod respectfully, not because you agree, but because he has a rifle across his knees in a very clear tan line where his hat used to be. This is where things get complicated. See, in the 1880s West, there's no real consensus on who owns a spring. Property lines are dreams printed on dusty maps, and water rights are decided less by deeds and more by volume of ammunition. If you have a gun, some livestock, or a tragic backstory, congratulations, you might just be entitled to a puddle. You don't have any of those things. I'm just passing through, you say. Need to fill this bucket, same as y'all. The man with the rifle eyes the bucket. What you trading? You pat your pockets. 1 broken harmonica, 2 buttons, a peppermint candy melted into its wrapper. You offer the candy. He squints at it, like it's made of rattlesnake venom, then shrugs. Fine, but don't splash. And just like that, you're granted access to one of nature's least refreshing beverages. You lower the bucket into the stream, mindful of every ripple, every sideways glance. The water's warm, but it's wet. That's enough. You fill up cap, have your canteen, and lift the bucket like it's a holy relic. No one speaks. That's the unspoken rule of frontier hydration. Be grateful, be quiet, and leave before anyone remembers what they're missing. You turn to go. A single drop escapes your bucket and lands with a soft plop. All three men watch it hit the dirt. Time to walk faster. The sun, once merely offensive, is now openly hostile. It presses down on your shoulders like an invisible anvil radiating through your hat shirt and spine, as if determined to steam cook you from the top down. You've barely made it a quarter mile back toward town when the symptoms start. First, your mouth goes beyond dry. It feels like you've been sucking on a hot saddle. Then your vision gets soft around the edges, like an old daguerreotype photo beginning to fade. You pause under a skeletal ocotillo shrub, hoping for shade, but it offers about as much relief as crouching under a hat made of disappointment. Your breath is shallow, your skin hot, but your sweat glands are on strike. Not a good sign. That's when things begin to shift. You glance to the right and see a jackrabbit standing perfectly still, wearing what appears to be a monocle. You blink, it's gone. You chalk it up to sun glare until you see your own shadow stagger to the left when you're standing perfectly still. Heat stroke doesn't just dehydrate the body, it rewires your personality. You begin to think things like, I should have left earlier. Maybe if I lay down for just a minute in this sand, next to this curious scorpion. I wonder what water tastes like in Boston. And most dangerously, I'm not thirsty anymore. That one's the red flag. You sit for a second, then slap yourself politely but firmly. You must keep moving. You force a sip from your canteen, just enough to remind your body what it's missing. You start muttering to yourself, not from madness yet, but from desperate motivation. Just a few more miles, you say. Just a few more cow skulls, 2 more hallucinations, and one inevitable philosophical reckoning. You rise one sun-baked boot step at a time, your bucket sloshing like it's mocking you. You are not okay, but you are moving. Somewhere between delirium and dehydration, you spot salvation. A plump barrel cactus, its green ribs practically bulging with juice. It stands tall among the sand and sagebrush, basking in the same sun that's trying to bake you into jerky. You stare at it. It stares back metaphorically. Your brain, already soft-boiled from the heat, whispers a traitorous idea. You know people drink cactus water. It's natural. It's from the earth. Maybe it's good. You glance around. No one in sight. Not even the monocled jackrabbit. You pull out your pocket knife and cut into the cactus. The flesh is tough defensive even, but you manage to scoop out a chunk and squeeze. A few cloudy drops dribble into your canteen lid. You sniff it. It smells green, like wet grass mixed with something that's been in a root cellar too long. You hesitate. Then you drink. At first, it's not so bad. Then it hits. The taste is somewhere between spoiled cucumber and guilt. bitter, mucilaginous, and faintly metallic. Your mouth puckers, your stomach gurgles. Something deep in your intestines whispers, "Oh no." Turns out, most cactus water, especially from barrel cactus, is mildly toxic. It contains oxalates, which can cause vomiting, diarrhea, and hallucinations of questionable moral value. You begin to understand why this plant is left untouched by even the dumbest desert creatures. You spit, you curse, you wonder if there's a saint for poor hydration decisions. Somewhere behind you, a buzzard circles. You wipe your mouth. Decide against further cactus-based experiments and press on your dignity wounded your digestive tract on high alert. But at least your bucket's still full. For now, just when you think the worst is behind you, coyotes, heatstroke, cactus regret you, round a bend near the creek bed, and stumble upon a trio of souls who look like they crawled out of a Mark Twain fever dream. They sit on mismatched crates and wagon wheels beside a sluggish curve of the stream, passing around a dented tin mug and arguing in the exaggerated slow-motion cadence of folks with nowhere to be and nothing to do. Water don't run uphill. One says poking the stream with a stick like he's trying to teach it shame. It does, if you pay the right surveyor. Another replies, adjusting her sun hat, which is mostly held together by wishful thinking and chicken wire. The third, a man with a beard so long it's become furniture for two tiny lizards, spots you first. Stranger, you look like you've licked the devil's boot. Come sit. You're not sure if it's a threat or hospitality, but you nod and take a cautious seat on a nearby rock. They ask you where you're from, what you're doing, and whether your bucket has a name. You tell them, Cactus Junction, fetching water, and know your bucket is just a bucket. Shame, says the woman. A named bucket carries more luck. Mine's called Thirsty Sue, says the stick poker proudly. Never cracked once. Then the lizard beard man leans in with the gravity of a man who hasn't blinked since the war and says, "Don't drink upstream from someone with secrets." That's how you get ghost sick. You nod slowly, because what do you say to that? They each offer a tip for the road. Always tap your boots before putting them on. Never trust a man who wears gloves in summer. And if you hear singing from the creek at night, don't answer. You'll lose your name. Then, just as casually, they go back to debating whether the stream used to flow west or if that was just a shared hallucination from the winter of canned peaches. You thank them, lift your bucket, and continue on your way, carrying a little more water, a few more warnings, and the distinct feeling that the line between parched and peculiar is thinner than you thought. You've made it halfway home. The sun is now less oppressive tyrant and more slowly suffocating blanket, but you're still upright. The bucket sloshes in your hand. Every drop feels precious, sacred even. So naturally, you decide to drink some. You find a flat rock sit and carefully uncap the canteen. The water smells faintly of iron moss and something vaguely amphibian. You sniff it again, trying to ignore the fact that the last thing to bathe in that stream might have been a possum with poor decision-making skills. Still, your thirst trumps your instincts. You drink. It's lukewarm and tastes like it passed through 3 armadillos and a rusty boot, but it's wet. You down a generous gulp, then cap it. For a moment, all seems well. Then it hits. It starts in the gut, a polite grumble, like your stomach's clearing its throat. But within minutes, the polite gurgle becomes a full-blown protest, a revolution. You double over, suddenly aware that what you drank was not just water. It was a lively community of bacteria, algae, and microbial ambition. Your stomach, unused to modern concepts like filtration or hygiene, begins filing complaints. Loud ones. You groan. You sweat. You wonder if death by dehydration might have been the better choice after all. And just as you're contemplating curling into a ball and letting the buzzards sort things out, you remember the outhouse back in town. It's 2 miles away, uphill, in the sun. You stand up, slightly bent, bucket sloshing stomach, murmuring like a distant thunderstorm. You walk, very, very carefully. Every step now is a gamble. Every jolt, a potential betrayal. You the bucket, and your bowels locked in an uneasy truce as you trudge onward toward the promise of relief and outhouse privacy. The return journey was never going to be a parade, but you didn't expect it to feel like a slow-motion punishment administered by nature itself. The bucket, once your humble sidekick, now seems to weigh as much as a cannonball. Every step makes it swing with malicious enthusiasm, sloshing precious ounces into the dirt, like it knows exactly how much suffering you've invested in it. Your stomach still gurgles occasionally, issuing vague threats. You've developed a sort of rhythm step grimace, clench, exhale, repeat. The sun shows no sign of retreat. The path stretches endlessly ahead, warped by heat shimmer and your own questionable depth perception. You pass the same cow skull from earlier and you swear it's judging you now. You try shifting the bucket to your other hand only to realize that both shoulders ache. Both palms are blistered, and your spine has begun composing protest letters to your legs. There's no good side anymore, only slightly less ruined. As you trudge forward, you hear voices behind you, faint but familiar. The river folk. Their laughter drifts across the sagebrush like wind chimes made of teeth. You don't look back. Part of you wonders if they were real. The part that still believes in plumbing sincerely hopes not. By the time you see the edge of town, you're practically hallucinating. The buildings shimmer. You think you see someone waving, but it turns out to be a laundry sheet caught in the breeze. Still, it feels like a welcome. Your boots slap the dirt road as you stumble into Cactus Junction, filthy hunched and smelling faintly of regret and lukewarm pond. You made it, but at what cost? You limp into Cactus Junction like a war survivor whose enemy was distance dust and gastrointestinal betrayal. Your shirt is stuck to you in 6 different places, and your bucket, though technically full, has lost a measurable portion to the sand your shoes and perhaps your pride. Before you can collapse onto your porch, you hear the unmistakable creak of rocking chairs. You glance up. There they are. The town elders. 3 of them lined up on the general store's porch like buzzards in suspenders. Judge Holloway, Miss Thistlethwaite, and Sheriff Rourke, retired, but still armed with unsolicited opinions. Each sips something cool and amber from a glass that sweats with indifference, likely whiskey, possibly judgment. Well now, says Judge Holloway, squinting over his spectacles, look who dragged himself home. Bucket's too full. Miss Thistlethwaite observes, shaking her head. Didn't ration the weight. Amateur mistake. Sheriff Rourke just spits into a rusty tin and mutters, bet he drank upstream again. You open your mouth to defend yourself, but what comes out is a low wheeze that might be words or just steam escaping your body. Either way, it earns a chuckle. Miss Thistlethwaite tuts and stands brushing biscuit crumbs from her lap. She crosses over and with all the grace of a retired drill sergeant, takes the bucket from your trembling hand. Come back when you can carry water without looking like a boiled turtle, she says kindly, if not helpfully. You nod. The porch creaks. Someone laughs. And as you sink onto your stoop legs, throbbing mouth parched, all over again, you realize something with the clarity of a fever dream. Out here, survival isn't just about grit or muscle. It's about knowing the rules, both written and ridiculous. And apparently, it's also about impressing 3 people who once voted against indoor plumbing because they thought it was showy. It's the next morning. Your legs ache. Your stomach is slowly forgiving you, and your hands look like they've been in a fist fight with a sandpaper salesman. You hobble into the general store in search of something vaguely edible and perhaps a moment of dignity. That's when you hear it. You didn't know about the well behind the church. Young man at the counter chewing on a licorice root like it owes him money. You freeze. What well, you ask, voice barely audible over the squeak of the store's warped floorboards. He turns slowly puzzled. The one Reverend Elkins dug last spring? It's got a pulley and everything, even a bench. Shade too. Your brain short circuits. Miss Thistlethwaite, who's restocking jars of pickled okra in the corner, chimes in without looking up. We don't tell just anybody. That well's for church use town council. And folks with good posture. You blink. I walked 8 miles yesterday. Fought a rattlesnake. Hallucinated a lizard choir. Drank cactus goo. And had to negotiate with a man whose beard had zoning laws. Well, she says, uncapping a jar now, you know. And that's it. No apology. No thank you for your service. Just a quiet understanding that the West doesn't owe you fairness. It barely owes you a drink. You wander behind the church just to see for yourself. There it is, a stone well shaded by a cottonwood tree, complete with rope bucket and a little wooden bench for civilized hydration. You sit. You laugh. Then you cry a little, mostly out of dehydration. You draw a scoop of cool, clear water. No algae, no bandits. No need to trade a melted peppermint. It tastes like betrayal and mercy. And maybe, just maybe, a second chance. You lie on your cot that night, arms splayed, boots off body, aching in places you didn't know could ache. The room is still, save for the occasional creak of old wood adjusting to the coolness of desert dusk. Your canteen sits beside you, finally full of clean water from the secret well. And yet the trauma of yesterday still lingers like the taste of bad cactus. You close your eyes and drift toward sleep, and that's when it starts. The dream. It begins with a faint dripping. Not an ominous drip, but a comforting one. Steady, measured, refreshing. Suddenly, you're in a porcelain palace, gleaming tile-polished brass knobs and cool linoleum beneath your bare, unblistered feet. A chrome faucet sits above a deep white basin. You twist it. Water. clean, gushing, endless water. You gasp. You cup it in your hands and splash it on your face. It doesn't run away. It doesn't require negotiation hiking or livestock sacrifices. It just flows from a pipe in your house. Then you spot it in the corner, a toilet. Your heart skips a beat. No more privies. No more midnight walks with a lantern and a prayer. Just a silent porcelain throne, waiting patiently to do its one glorious job. You approach it reverently. You flush it. Angels sing. Just as you begin to weep, tears of joy, a hand claps your shoulder. You turn. It's the monocled jackrabbit again. He's dressed in a velvet robe, now sipping cucumber water. Don't get used to it, he says solemnly. This is a dream cowboy. You jolt awake, heart pounding. The bucket is still by the door. The outhouse still creaks in the dark. And plumbing, real honest-to-goodness indoor plumbing, is still just a twinkle in the future's eye. But for a moment, it was yours. And maybe someday it will be again. Sunday arrives dusty and sun-scorched, like every other day, except this one carries the faint scent of expectation and beeswax polish. You hear the church bell clanging away with all the determination of someone who thinks salvation can be wrung into existence, which out here it might. You wander toward the small clapboard chapel, mostly out of curiosity and a desire to sit in the only shaded public building in town. Inside, a dozen sunburnt souls gather on creaking pews. Reverend Elkins, tall, stooped, and always squinting like God wrote too small, adjusts his collar and clears his throat. Today, he says, we welcome Brother Randall into the fold through the sacred rite of desert baptism. You glance over. Randall, new to town, clean-shaven, looks like he still has hope, stands awkwardly in front of a large galvanized washtub half filled with water from the secret well. You feel a twinge. That water could have spared you the rattlesnake. Let us witness this spiritual cleansing, the Reverend proclaims. Randall steps into the tub. A collective murmur rises. That's at least 3 full buckets in there. Everyone watches, eyes glinting with quiet envy. Elkins lifts a tin cup, dips it into the tub, and pours it gently over Randall's head. The man gasps, startled by how not boiling the water is. A few people sigh. A child whispers, lucky, but the moment turns oddly beautiful. In a place where thirst governs time and weather mocks ambition, here is a ritual that wastes nothing, yet somehow feels generous. You sit blinking in the dim light thinking, if water can be holy out here, maybe survival is too. Maybe every blister, every grit-toothed mile with a bucket is its own kind of sacrament. Randall emerges soaked and blinking. He smiles. You're not sure if it's faith relief or just the joy of being recently damp. You don't clap. No one claps. But you feel it and understanding that sometimes getting wet in front of your neighbors is the most profound thing you'll do all week. The next day arrives, like all the others, hot, dusty, and full of unspoken challenges. But something's different. You still wake up parched. Your boots still crunch over sun-baked dirt. But now, when you pick up your bucket, your body doesn't protest. It simply complies. The blisters have become calluses. The ache has turned into muscle memory. The fear, muted like an old scar you've learned to ignore. You nod at Mrs. Caldwell as you pass her porch. She doesn't speak, just lifts her fan in solemn frontier acknowledgement. You even spot the town elders still lined up on the general store stoop, sipping and smirking. Judge Holloway squints at you and mutters, "He's finally dried up enough to be useful." Miss Thistlethwaite gives a single approving nod. Sheriff Rourke grunts in what might be encouragement or mild indigestion. You've been judged, and astonishingly accepted. You reach the secret well, fill your bucket, and pause. You could linger in the shade. You could drink right there and rest, but you don't. Instead, you hoist the bucket, adjust your stance, and walk back, smooth, steady, no spills. You even wave to the jackrabbit in your peripheral vision, monocled or not. This time, you don't feel like you're battling the desert. You feel like part of it. You are dust-tested, heat-hardened, and mildly dyspeptic, but undeniably acclimated. You're a survivor now, and for the first time since arriving in Cactus Junction, you feel it in your bones. Maybe, just maybe, you belong here.